everyone. My name is Robin, and welcome to my channel, The Prophetic Engineer, where we talk about how to know and live by God's design for your life. It's been a while. I actually had a birthday last month in August and turned into a birthday month. Went to New York and did a few other things for my birthday, but happy to be back. So today we're going to talk about the transition. I feel as though we're in a season where a lot of us are transitioning from one location to the next, transitioning to one stage of life to another stage, or even just transitioning careers or a transitioning in a job, specific job in the same career, but just a lot of transition. And we're going to discuss how to really transition successfully. So when I say transition successfully, what I mean is transition in a way where it is not extending the time that you're in transition and extending the time it takes for you to get to the position you need to be where you start to walk out the destiny and calling on your life. One thing that comes to mind is the Israelites transitioning from Egypt to the Promised Land, which we know took them 40 years. And we also know that it didn't have to take them 40 years. And so when we talk about transition, it really means a change. So there are three things I want to talk about today. So the first thing is, what is the vision that God has spoken over your life, and knowing the vision that He has spoken over your life? Why is this important? It's important because just by knowing where you're going, eventually you'll understand that these transitions or changes are needed, and they're of God. They're needed to get you to the point where you're in position for that vision. So we're going to go to the story of Joseph. Joseph had many transitions before he got to the final vision. So he had a dream, and then in the dream, essentially, his family was bowing down to him. Between that dream and that actually happened, Joseph was sold into slavery. Joseph was in Potiphar's house. Joseph was thrown into prison. Joseph then was under Pharaoh as the second in command. Then Joseph transitioned from being single to being married and to being a father, and then to the point where his family bowed down to him. And in between that time, there were many transitions. A lot of them were very hard, but there was a vision that God initially had set. And so just by knowing that, if you're in a state where this transition or the change you're going through is painful, or it is not what you welcome or you want, that God will work everything for the good of those who love Him, right? And there are things that are happening in the background that are working that will get you to where you need to be. What comes to mind is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, where it says, "Trust in the Lord with all thy heart, and lean not into thy own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your path." So the second thing I want to talk about is, if you're in the transition, what did God say before the transition? What is God saying during the transition? God has probably spoken to you and said some things to you, or said some things through prophetic word, spoken through situations, and He's preparing you for what's to come, to set you up for success through this change. A good example is in Joshua 1, where God tells Joshua to be strong and courageous, right? So they have gotten into the Promised Land, and there was a need for Joshua to still be strong and courageous, because they will have to fight the nations that were in the Promised Land to get to the final where they were supposed to inhabit. And so God speaks to us and He tells us, and it's all to prepare us. A personal example for me is when I was moving. This was the time where I knew I had to move, but I had not moved yet. And I already had said yes to moving. So the process had started, and I fell asleep and I woke up, and it's in between that sleep and waking up that the Lord spoke to me, and He said, "You're going to think that you don't belong there, but you do. And you're going to think that you're not supposed to be there, but you are." The reason why I did get that was within a year. I don't even think it was a year. Within a few months, I remember I would say to myself, "I'm not supposed to be here. I don't belong here." And it was this constant battle. Even this year, I've had to use what God said as swords to fight against like these words coming at me saying, "I'm not supposed to be here," or "I don't belong here." And I feel like every time I think about that, I think about what God said, and I'm like, He really was preparing me for what was to come, that this wasn't going to be easy, but those thoughts were going to come to me while I'm here. And so pay attention, write it down. I'm gonna repeat that. Write it down. Whenever he's speaking to you, write it down so you can always go back to it. The third thing I want to talk about is, you know, the vision, you know what God is saying before and during the transition. The third one would be making sure that your heart is aligned with what God is doing in this season in your life, right? This is very important. So when we go back to the example of the Israelites, that's really why it took them 40 years. Part of it was they weren't aligned. Their heart wasn't aligned and they didn't truly believe God. The heart was hardened that they were going to get to the promised land. So make sure your heart is in alignment with what God is saying and believing with all the words he's given you, the vision he's giving, believe what he is saying. And so having your heart coming to alignment can take a while, but one of the things that definitely it takes is just a vulnerability with God. For me, when I think about this move, this is one of the biggest and honestly the hardest transitions that I've had. And one of the things that I believe it was so hard for me was this really trusting God with what he was doing, right? My eyes would see certain things. I would experience certain things. And it was hard for me. You know, I say I trust God. I say I believe in God. But when it really came down to it, my heart wasn't aligned because I truly didn't trust. That was the honest truth. And I personally had to go through some soul healing on that one. And a lot of it came down to, you know, when I moved here, you know, I had said yes and I got excited, but then I got here and it wasn't what I thought it was going to be with the job that I moved here for. You want to get aligned as quick as possible as you can. It may be hard at first, but the Lord will walk you through it. So just to recap, know the vision that God has given you. Know what God is saying during your transition. Know what he said right before your transition. Make sure it's written down somewhere where you can go back to it when you need it. And the third one is make sure that your heart is aligned with what God is doing. So curious to hear, are any of you guys in transition? If so, what are your thoughts about it? And if you like this video, please like and share. And thank you and have a wonderful day.